and welcome to another exciting episode of Riding Through the Unknown. I'm your host, Michael, and with me tonight are two amazing guests who I am so excited to be talking with and cannot wait to hear about their adventures and experiences. So, without further ado, I'm going to allow my guests to introduce themselves. The amazing, awesome Leslie and Stephen Shaw.
Thank you, Michael. What a nice introduction. So, I'm Leslie Shaw, and this is my husband, Stephen Shaw. I'm a semi-retired journalist, and Stephen is a retired acupuncturist and a Tai Chi master, and also a orchestral musician. He's a brilliant musician.
But did my military duty too, also.
Yeah, that doesn't have much to do with our book, but that's kind of our background. And but we have been studying the UFO phenomenon for many years. Stephen started studying it when he was 31, and I started when I was 45. So we've been at it for a total of 55 years, I guess, combined.
Yeah, pre-cell phone and pre-internet. So
a lot of reading.
Well, thank you, Stephen, for your service. And I just want to point out my father was a SeaBee too. So when I saw that, I was like, "Oh, another SeaBee!"
Yeah,
I was actually a BU or a builder in the SeaBee. So that's different, different designations. Electricians made, machinists made. I was a builder, so I did that for 6 years, from 80 to 86.
Wow.
Yes. Serving mostly at the 29 Palms Marine Corps base.
No, that was only one of the
other places too.
Yeah, Midway and Port Hueneme and
he's one of the few people who have gone to Midway.
I actually did a tour of duty on Midway Island. So
wow.
Say that and seeing the baby Goonie birds and all that kind of stuff. So
is it as small as they advertise it as?
7.5 miles around. I can attest to that because a friend of mine. We both ran around the island one morning before breakfast. Actually, it was. Yes, it's 7.5 miles around, so that's the circumference of it.
Wow, and such amazing amount of history for such a small little speck.
Yeah,
there still was like an old plane that had crashed back in 1981 when I was there. That was still there.
Was it from the battle?
It was. It must have been.
The battle of Midway?
From the battle. It was like, it was like in a remote part of the island. We were running around the beach part, right? So we came across this one. So
yeah. So I gotta admit, Stephen, reading your bio and yours, Leslie's, I feel like I have done so little with my life because you guys have so many different aspects. I was like, wow, how did they find the time?
Oh, thank you. We are in our 60s now, so
I kind of feel like I kind of topped out like about the age 45. I got like a lot of stuff done in my life, and then about 45 or about 50, I kind of haven't been doing quite as much as I did like early in my life. So yeah.
So what got you into UFOs? What was like the catalyst that you were like, "Oh, this is the moment I'm going to start devoting all my time to researching this"?
I'll take this, okay, because it kind of really applies more to me and
started with him,
and my family background, really going back to the age of 3. And I was told as a child that we had this family spirit guide called O'Glegley that had been with the family for a long time and would show up from time to time and sometimes help out people or whatnot, right? So I'm 3 years old, so I just take it just like Santa Claus kind of thing, all right, or the Easter Bunny. So when I was 3 years of age, I would be visited from time to time in the middle of the night by this invisible 2-legged entity that would jump on my stomach and my chest in the middle of the night, kind of playfully. And, it was invisible, so I knew it wasn't the cat. Number one, it had 2 legs, and it wasn't the dog because, dog was much heavier. So this would happen.
And they weren't invisible.
Right. They weren't invisible. So no, this is kind of the thing, for me. And then when I hit the age of 8 years old, I saw what I call the shimmery garden gnomes. That one time I was sleeping on the top of a bunk bed. My brother was 2, so he was on the bottom bunk and I was on the top bunk. And I saw these. I was waking again in the middle of the night. It's always the middle of the night, and I saw these like little foot and a half. I think they're a little bit over a foot. I call them, garden gnomes. There's like 4 or 5 of them. They looked all male, and they were shimmery, and they were walking into my room, kind of backlit by the kitchen light. And I looked at them. Trying to say, "Am I seeing things?" And by the way, we did not have a TV set in our room. Okay, that was, this is 1968, so we barely had a black and white TV to start with. So, anyways, I looked at them, and then I just got scared and I turned over. Now, when my brother hit the age of 8, he started sleeping in the closet. And he slept in the closet for 2 years. And I asked my brother Philip at the time, why are you sleeping in the closet? And he told me that I'm afraid of the little men that come at night. And I believed him because I had seen the little men that come at night. I'd seen them once. I do not know how many times Philip had seen them. And then when I was 9, I was awakened by this strange noise that I heard coming from the living room in the house. And I got out of the bunk bed, and my heart was pounding, and I was kind of in adrenal mode because I was literally kind of scared what I was going to see. And so I was walking down the hallway. It was dimly lit, and before I got to the end of the hallway, I just black out. And then next thing I know, I woke up in my bed, on the bunk bed, and with no recollection as far as what had happened. And then at the age of 12 was when I saw my first UFO. And this was about 9:30 at night in 1972. And I was looking outside the front door, and I just happened to see this large orange globe that was moving horizontally at a slow pace, going from south to north, maybe about 500 to 1,000 feet in the air, no more than that. And it kind of paused, and then it continued on. And I just looked at this, and this is really weird. But I wasn't scared. Okay, so
And
it wasn't scary.
And he told me it was moving too slow to be a plane, and yet it couldn't be a helicopter because it was silent.
It was silent. I thought, what is that, helicopter? Is it airplane? No. I called Griffith Park Observatory the next day, and next night actually, and they said, young man, we don't have our telescopes pointed that way. Although there were a numerous amount of UFO sightings in that whole area in the 70s, which was kind of interesting. There's a big one that happened in Tarzana at a drive-in movie theater. That was, I think, 1975 or something like that, where a bunch of people saw a UFO. A bunch of young people, of course.
We live along the 33rd parallel, and it's supposed to be along the 33rd parallel where most of UFOs are spotted. And we found that to be kind of true. We sort of live in a hot spot area for it.
Yes.
One thing I'm kind of curious about is you mentioned in your bio having a family history of alien abduction that you research. And I'm wondering, is a lot of people say if you have military in your family's background, you're visited by UFOs. It tends to up your chances. Or do you have that, and do you find that to be true as well?
It certainly was military in your family, right?
Every man in the family was military, apart from my younger brother. He never went into the military. Both my uncles were my father and his father. Pretty much, as far as I know, almost every man in the different bloodlines. 4 different bloodlines, basically, from Germany to England to North and Southern California. Almost all of us were military.
And we did, as we were doing our research, we discovered that there's also a psychic connection to it. Stephen has a very psychic family. The women in the family all did automatic writing and communication with this old Glegly character. And Stephen is incredibly psychic. He's constantly reading my mind. And we thought, and then as I was meeting other people who had had these experiences, I kept meeting people who were psychic, abductees, that either this one's a psychic healer or this one's a medium. And we just recently discovered that this is been proven. Luis Elizondo, the gentleman who released the big story to the New York Times with the 3 now famous videos, Tic Tac, Go Fast, and Gimbal. He wrote a book recently, and we have it, of course.
Imminent.
And it says that they did, he was in charge of this ATIP program, and he said they did MRI scans of the brains of abductees and found them to have the same kind of brains as people who have ESP or remote viewing capabilities. So there is a connection between it.
It's called the parahippocampal gyrus. It's on both sides of the brain. It crosses the corpus callosum, and it's bicameral, and it's larger, more developed in people that have those type of capabilities. So I would suspect that probably I have it too. So I would suspect.
And at first, we didn't really understand what was going on, but see, with the abduction phenomenon, one of the signatures for it is people will see something frightening or weird or odd, and then they'll black out, and then 3 hours later wake up in bed or next to their bed or something. And apparently this is just the signature for the abduction phenomenon. And we tried to break through Stephen's mental block in these blackout times, but the block is just too well placed, and we have yet to succeed breaking through it.
Yeah, I've only ever met one hypnotist that I would consider to be really above board and really, really good. That was Pat Collins on my 19th birthday, 1979, July 28th, and it was absolutely like a curtain came down over me and the other 8 people that were on stage. It was amazing. I would not have thought that it was possible.
So we know he can be hypnotized, but we just haven't succeeded with the hypnotherapists we've gone to since then.
No, exactly. No, not yet.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's blocked because of protection for you and Leslie and your family.
Yeah, the trauma involved might. I do know when Betty Hill, she's a famous abductee, Betty and Barney Hill, and when she was regressed, when she broke through the block, she started screaming in terror. So we are talking about a frightening, traumatic experience that maybe his psyche is just not ready to.
Well, I've seen a lot of stuff before and after, as far as beings in my room and things such as that. My brother saw actually what we're dealing with. My brother, when he was 16 in 1982, he was 6 years younger than me. He has passed away because of a very terrible thing that happened. But anyway, when he was 16, he saw on the third night of a series of events, he saw a 6.5 tall, skinny gray that was standing in his doorway at night, and they looked at each other for a second or two, and then
he blacks out and wakes up 6 hours later.
This was not at the same house. This is the house that we were actually building because we were cabinet makers and carpenters, so we were actually building a house up in Sonora. So,
and you know how hauntings tend to be locked to a place, ghosts tend to be frozen at a location, right? But in the case of the abduction phenomenon, it follows the family. It started in Germany and then went to England and then Southern California and then Central California.
And that's just what we know. I haven't gone back 5 generations yet. I haven't done the ancestry thing or anything like that. So I don't know anything past 4 generations.
But they've been dealing with it since then. And once Philip saw the tall gray, that's when we realized what we were dealing with. Now we know.
Old Blakely always appears the same way. 6.5 feet tall and skinny, sometimes dark, sometimes blue-white. It appeared blue-white to me. Appeared as a tall gray to my brother. Appeared as a tall black man wearing a red fez to my uncle.
A dark figure.
In Salon. Actually saved his life. He wouldn't have survived if this figure hadn't shown up and told him to get out of the tent, because there was a raiding party coming through because he was in the military. So there was, Ceylon, which is now Sri Lanka. They were billeted out there in a multi-man tent, and he was in a cot, and he was awakened in the middle of the night by this tall, skinny, 6.5 foot tall figure wearing a red hat, red fez, as he called it, and it said, "Douglas, you need to get up now and leave. You might be killed." And so he knew about the old Glegley stuff from my grandmother and from my mother. So he believed. He didn't expect it, but he believed, and he got out of the cot and he went outside. And sure enough, about a minute and a half, 2 minutes later, a raiding party came through with machetes and guns and killed several of the officers. And he recounted the story to me a couple different times when I was in my early teens. And the funny thing is that the family took it so seriously, this old Glegley thing, that when his daughter came of age where she could drive, he bought her a nice white Triumph because he wasn't lacking for money. Okay. So anyway, so you can guess probably what the license plate that they got for her was.
It's all Glegley.
It's all Glegley, yeah. That's how much, and my uncle was dead serious about it, as was my parents.
And-
they were dead serious about it.
And when we started doing the research into the abduction phenomenon, the theory at the time was that aliens are just curious about us. They just want to take a few scientific samples, no big deal. But that really wasn't what was happening. We found that once they find a genetic line that they are after, that meets their criteria, they will prey on that person again and again and again through their lives, and then start taking their kids and their grandkids. And it seems to us more like they're harvesting a product that they need, kind of like a cow, a farmer and his cow relationship. So the protector, they also protect the family, right? It's just like a cow, a prize cow would be protected by its farmer, but also preyed on by the farmer when he's stealing the milk out of it, right? So that's how I sort of began to think of it. The abduction phenomenon is that they're after a specific line of genetic,
DNA.
a certain DNA line that they're after. And in Stephen's case, he meets one of the criterias is that they tend to take Caucasians. 9 out of 10 abductees are Caucasian. And
Whether they be Basque or whatnot, but yes.
And we've also discovered that about 4 out of 10 people taken have green eyes, and green eyes are a recessive trait in humans, like
Correct.
a mutation. And they tend to take more Rh negatives than like 4 out of 10 abductees are Rh negative, but we only make up. I happen to be too, but we only make up 1/9 of the population.
And the Caucasians only make up 16% of the world's population. So the facts, the statistics were just not adding up. And by the way, my uncle Douglas, his last name was Griffiths, and the only reason he was associated with our family is because he married my mom's older sister. So really, we're talking about 4 different bloodlines. They had an interest in protecting or interacting with 4 different bloodlines.
Yes.
That I know of.
Yeah, and I'd like to take a moment and say my condolences for your loss of your brother, was it? And
thank you. Yes, that was so horrible.
My brother, and my mother, and my dad, all within 3 months.
Well,
and my brother killed my mom after he killed his cats, and it was
horrible.
It was brutal.
I actually lay the blame at the abduction phenomenon because he was terrified as a child, and that really messes you up later in life. You get like a PTSD, and he never was emotionally stable person. He was a brilliant man, a genius, really, and teaching calculus at the high school and college, right?
Right, just for fun.
For jollies, But he never was emotionally stable. And later in life, he became hermit-like and miserly and very, very paranoid near the end.
Yeah.
And the loss of his father died in August, their father.
Yeah, and, on the eclipse.
Yeah, and then
2017.
And then just 4 months, it seemed to unbalance his mind. And the emails we started getting from him became weirder and weirder and weirder and
Unhinged.
More and more paranoid. And then finally, and we were, he was their mother's only caregiver. And we were starting to wonder, what can we do? We're starting to think, well, we have to do something. We have to somehow intervene because a crazy person is in charge of their mother. But then it was too late. Then we lost communication and had to send the cops for a wellness check, and found that he'd killed his 2 cats, his mother, and himself with a shotgun. So that was like so traumatic.
Yeah.
But back to the UFO thing is, in Stephen's case and Philip's, it seems like they came in clusters, the events. Stephen had like a weird cluster of 5 things in 5 nights.
But it affected the whole family. Mine in 1979 affected all 5 members of the family in 2 different locations, whereas Philip, it was at the Sonora house we were building in 1982. And those were separate for him. Those were 3 for him. But the ones that happened with me were experienced by all 5 members of the family.
Film the first night and go. Tell all of it.
I'll tell the short version here.
No,
the first night,
we have an hour and a half.
Yeah,
tell the long version.
Right. The first night, my dad came to breakfast. My dad was a cabinet maker, and I was, basically working with my dad to support the family. I didn't want to be a cabinet maker, but anyways, I enjoyed, the experience. So, anyways, he came to breakfast, and this is the guy who had been a bobby, which is, a cop in England from 52 to 56, and he was also in the RAF before that. So, anyways, he came to breakfast, and he said, Stephen, my closet doors opened and closed on me last night. And of course, I just didn't think too much about it. But I thought that was kind of like, oh, great dream, Dad. So
shrugged it off.
Anyway, at this point in my life, I had started studying Tai Chi with a really good teacher, and in a class. So anyway, I was reading Paramahansa's work called Metaphysical Meditations, and I was really enjoying it. So I gave my dad the book. Said, Dad, you should read this. And so he went into the living room, and half an hour later, about 9:30 at night, he came into my bedroom and said, I'm hearing a silver bell. Now, myself being a lifetime musician, I know the sound of a silver bell. So I went into the living room, and sure enough, there's the ding, 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 and it's coming from inside the wall by the fireplace. I mean, not in the fireplace, but by the wall, in the wall by the fireplace. And we're looking up the flu and that kind of stuff. And then we got my sister, who was 13 at the time and just didn't want to have anything to do with it. But first thing she did when she came into the living room, she said, where's that bell coming from? And so we went to the wall and we banged on the wall, trying to make some kind of logical sense out of it. Like, is it a squirrel? Is it, whatever, right?
Wearing a silver bell.
It went on for 10 minutes and then it stopped. And then we just kind of like, wow, that was really weird. So the next morning, every morning we would call my mom and my brother because, they were living at the house that we were building up in Sonora, which was 350 miles away.
Stephen,
it was do that like every day.
Yeah, because Philip just started school early
right.
Up there was all,
Yeah. So anyway, well, this was January, so he was already in school. Okay.
I mean, he was going to school up in Sonora.
Yeah.
And the rest of the family was still working the business down in Southern California.
So anyway, my mom said, to my dad, she said, hey, Jeffrey, the weirdest thing happened last night. Around about 9 o'clock at night, I heard this bell, and I thought it was the phone. So I picked up the phone, and there was this male voice on the other side saying something to the effect of, I am the invisible, I'm Beachy. It could have been Old Legley. I don't know, because she was half asleep. But so anyways, I got my brother on the phone. I said, Philip, did the phone ring last night? He said, I didn't hear the phone ring, but Mom picked up the phone and she was trying to have a conversation. This is exactly the same time that my sister, my dad, and myself were hearing the silver bell inside the wall by the fireplace. Okay. The next night, I was sleeping in my bedroom and I was awakened by a whizzing sound in the air, like a whoosh. And I turned over, I looked down the hallway, and there's a light on the kitchen, but I couldn't see anything as far as like a bug or anything like that. But it was just, it woke me up. Okay. So anyways, I rolled over on my left-hand side, just trying to go back to sleep. And then the bed was pushed twice from the base, push, kind of gently. And I thought, well, maybe a small earthquake or something. No, Southern California. Been through earthquakes. So anyways, try to ignore it and then push a little more vigorously. And then push, like wake up. And at this point, I'm thinking, is somebody trying to play a joke on me? And then I get tap, tap, tap on
his
my
shoulder,
mid-deltoid,
right here.
my mid-deltoid on my right side, just like an index finger is going light, tap, tap, tap. And at this point, I'm both scared and nervous and a little bit ticked off, quite frankly. And so I rolled over and I said, "What?" And I can see something's there. Something's kind of shimmery and then blackout. So I told my dad and my sister about it, and we did not know what to think, but we knew about the whole, this O'Glegley character, so we were just kind of taking it in stride, not freaking out too much. But the fact of the matter is, the next night I decided I'm not sleeping in that bedroom because if that happened last night, I don't know what's going to happen tonight. So I decided to sleep in my work clothes on the sofa in the living room, trying to mix things up a bit. And I woke about 5:30 in the morning in January, so it was dark, and I looked at my piano because I'm a pianist, and I think about what I was going to play, and then I listened to the fountain in the other room. So I was awake, not sleep paralysis for your audience. It's a big difference. And from behind me was the front door, and I was sleeping face up. So the front door was about 25 feet from behind me, and it was like this door opened, and this blue-white 6.5 foot tall, skinny entity, sound familiar, came walking, floating over to my right side in about a second and a half to 2 seconds, stopped by my right side, and immediately the right side of my nervous system just went like it was shut off. I mean, I felt it palpably on my right side, but realistically, I couldn't even move my left side, but I felt it like it was just shut off.
And the whole room was filled with this light.
Exactly. It was filled with, when this entity came in, it filled the whole room with blue-white light, intense blue-white light. And it stopped by me and it bent down and it whispered into my ear, not in my head, in my ear, said, "Hi, Steve," kind of in a whisper. I couldn't tell whether it was male or female. It didn't sound old. It just sounded like, "Hi, Steve." So it knew my name for one thing, and I was like thinking, "Oh, I'm going to see old Glegley." What I've heard about since I was 3 years of old, 3 years of age. So I'm going to see old Glegley. But the other half of me is saying, "Dude, you can't move. You are immobilized." Okay, and so
He was like excited and scared.
I was a 50,
like a mix.
I was a 50-50, as far as like I can't move, but I want to see your face. I was trying to look at his face, and then I guess the entity decided I was a little bit too scared or something, and it left, went back the other direction. Then again, I black out. Can't remember what happened between then and breakfast time. So I told my dad and my sister, and at this point, we're saying, "What is going to happen next?"
What's next? Yeah.
And so the last thing that happened was that, and I
No, the
have,
coins.
oh yeah, that's right, I forgot. Yeah. At lunchtime, I decided to go down to Jack in the Box to get some food for my dad and I. And I reached into my right hand side pocket. This is 6 hours after the incident, right? So I reached into my right hand side pocket, pulled some coins out and a couple of nails, and all the coins were magnetized. Okay. In other words, I could pick up the coins, and my dad could do too. Pick up by the edge, by the face. It didn't matter. Of course, the nails were magnetized, the 6 penny nails. But we could pick up the coins. It didn't matter. And we were saying, well, that's not possible.
Yeah, U.S. coins are specifically designed to not be magnetic, so they can go in vending machines and things.
Yeah, just before cell phones and all that kind of stuff. So we were working on doing a job, right? So I was thinking, well, anyways, we have to finish our job.
Back to work.
So, anyways, I didn't think at the time. I didn't think about maybe I should save these and put them in a jar or something like that. I did not think about that. So, anyways, the last night was what my dad experienced. He saw this wall of blue-white light that was outside my bedroom door, because we had a hallway separating our bedrooms and we had our doors open. And he woke up and he saw this intense wall of blue-white light. And he, having been an ex-cop and whatever, said, "I'm going to try and what's all this then?" kind of thing. I'm going to try and get to the bottom of this. So he was getting out of bed to go see what was going on. And then a voice inside his head said, and stopped him, said, "Jeffrey, just go back to sleep. Nothing to see here. Everything's fine." And that's what he did. He just basically went back to bed and just went to sleep.
Although I think
I have no recollection of that whatsoever.
Sorry. I think that they have a way of knocking people out, and that's what this blacking out thing is. And I think that's what they did to Jeffrey, because he wasn't the type to go, oh, I'll just take the alien's word for it that my son is fine
He grew up
and go back to bed.
He grew up as a child in World War II England, so
Very no-nonsense guy.
He'd seen a lot of stuff, as did my mom. So yes.
And then Phillips 3, he was staying at the Sonora house, and he woke in the middle of the night to these two bright white lights shining into his window, and he stared at it for a minute trying to figure it out, because his bedroom had this drop off under it that went way down to a creek and then a mountain on the other side, so there's nothing back there, no lights or houses or anything. And also it would have been floating up in the air like 30-40 feet. And as he's staring at it for a second, he blacks out and wakes up again the next morning. And then the next night, he's laying in bed trying to go to sleep, and he hears a scrabbling sound on the floor next to him. So he reaches down to pet what he thinks is the cat, and instead a hand grabs his wrist, a cold hand, he said, and he felt this like thrill of adrenaline and terror, and then blacks out anyway.
Like
so
anybody would, yeah.
Yeah, but it's weird that he was able to lose consciousness from it, you know.
And just a 6'3" guy, you know, he's not
afraid of much. Yeah, he was a big man.
And then the last night was when he was awake in the middle of the night and he saw
the gray alien in his.
This happened when he was 16. It happened to me when I was 18. But then my uncle, when he was in his 20s, when he was in Ceylon, and then my grandmother also, you know, told my mom about her experiences with Old Glegley.
And we think other family members were taken as well, but they particularly focused on the two boys, Philip and Stephen here.
For whatever reason, yeah.
And then, you know, his second UFO was close to my first. He in a short period of time, late 2004.
Yes.
He saw two more UFOs. One was a USO coming up out of the ocean in Malibu. And one was a cigar shape hovering over Yucca Valley. But then I hadn't seen anything, and I was like, I want to see something. I was actually getting a little jealous, you know. And I was a dutiful wife, right? I believed what he told me about all these experiences, but I could only believe like 98%, right? There was always this tiny little kernel of doubt, and it just couldn't quite get to the 100% mark.
Do you finally believe me?
I did. But then finally, I saw my first one in January of 2005. We were coming home from an art meeting at night. We did that monthly, and we drove from 29 Palms through Joshua Tree to our Yucca Valley home on Highway 62. And while we're in Joshua Tree, I look through the windshield. I'm driving, and he's in the passenger side. And I see this white light in the distance that looks kind of like twice as bright as Venus, say. And it's just a round white light. And I thought to myself, maybe a plane coming into Palm Springs Airport. But then you're staring at it, it didn't have the running lights of planes, you know, the little blinky lights on the side. And it wasn't moving like a plane. It moved very slow. And, you know, planes have to keep a certain airspeed to remain aloft. And it seemed too slow for that. And then it stopped above the highway in front of us and up in the sky still, but way in front of us along the highway. And it was getting brighter and brighter. And I don't know if it's because we were moving toward it, and maybe it was moving towards us too. I'm not sure. But it got brighter and brighter until it was about twice, half as bright as, say, the moon. And then it took off so fast. And over the northern horizon and gone in less than a quarter of a second, I would say. So quickly that visually it streaked into a line that collapsed in on itself. And
then she finally believed.
Yeah, then I was like, okay, I believe you now, 100%. And we should, you know, that book we've been thinking about writing, let's write it now, you know. And that's when I think I started doing even, you know, he had already been researching for years and years. And that's when I started actually researching in earnest, you know, reading everything I could and just combing through eyewitness reports and abductee reports.
Interviewing the family and that kind of stuff.
And reading everything we could about it. Too. Yeah. When we read, you know, I particularly like Professor Jacobs' work. David M. Jacobs. He has did 10,000 alien regressions, hypnotic regressions on abductees in his long career, and wrote several books about it. And I like his work because it gives us a big data pool to pull from. That's where we're able to, say this many are Caucasian and this many, because we have a big pool of data.
That was one of our data pools. Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And one of the strangest things about the whole phenomenon is that the breeding program, about 10 or 11% of the abductees that he regressed were women who said they had been abducted and impregnated. And then 4 months later, they're taken again and the fetus is stolen. And we know that this happens from the ultrasounds. It used to be just testimony, but now doctors have doing ultrasounds said, oh, yes, you were definitely pregnant here. And then 4 months later, it looks like you were never pregnant. Because when they take the fetus, they also take the placenta and everything, which doesn't happen in miscarriage.
Without leaving any scar tissue. And, they always take it about 5 centimeters in size, which is the size of American baseball.
Yeah.
And it's just like I say, and sometimes it happens 1, 2, 3, 4 times
in their lives.
It's like, okay, we find someone that we like that has what we need,
the genetic profile they want.
They will impregnate her, and then they will not eat. It's like I say, now we know, because we have ultrasound and more advanced technology. We know that, okay, yeah, you were pregnant, and now it looks like you were never pregnant, and that makes absolutely no sense.
Right. And then frequently they're taken years later and introduced to their hybrid offspring sometimes.
Have you read or heard of Karen Wilkinson?
Karen Wilkinson?
Yes.
Yes. She's on Instagram. I see her. She has several books on the subject. She's another one. She's one of these people that women that was taken and her children stolen away.
She knows that better than I do.
Yeah, I read more about her than Stephen has, but I know about her. Yes.
She's been a guest on my shows, and as you were saying what you were saying, I was like, oh, if you want a source to back you up, she has the exact same story. And so she would be a perfect source. And I have a question for you both, and it's one you may or may not have ever been asked in an interview. And that is, how has being exposed to the abductions, in your case, Stephen, and the UFOs in both your cases, influenced and affected your life? Did it have an impact?
Sure. I can't walk outside and look at the sky without thinking, oh, is there a UFO tonight? It's my first thought every time.
It has changed my viewpoint on things, because, like I say, I grew up thinking that it's almost like learning that Santa Claus isn't real, but Santa Claus is real, but something else. Okay. So, I thought, that this is the family spirit guide of Glegley. So now that I know that we're dealing with what we call our cousins, actually, Leslie and I would call our cousins. We don't call them ETs. That's not what our research has shown. Yeah. I look at it from a different standpoint. And you know what? I have had numerous sleepless nights. Basically, hundreds and hundreds of times I've been trying to get to sleep and just relaxing, and then I'll hear like a knock, like almost 3 times, right behind my head on the wall. Okay, just like somebody
trying to get us to fall asleep.
Knock, like waken. In fact, 3 weeks ago, I have no idea why this was. I just gone to the bathroom, at 6 a.m, went back to bed. It was dark, and I was not even asleep, and I was just trying to drift off, and then I got bump 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 behind my head on the wall.
And the green
anchor sleep. I have no clue, because we don't have a TV set in the bedroom. Okay, and Leslie wasn't there. She was in the living room. She was sleeping in the living room. So, but yeah, da 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 da. It's plain as day. But I still get things happening. I get precog. I've had 3 different precog dreams in the past 4 years, and so far 2 out of 3 of them have come true. In fact, the guy who did our documentary, 2 days before he came over, I had never met this guy before in my life before July the 4th of this year. We were doing a show up in Big Bear, and only sold one book. It was a bust, complete bust financially, right? So, but we were about ready to start packing up, right? And this guy came by, and he had heard me talking and to one of the vendors, and he introduced himself as a documentary maker. And we kind of got talking, and he said, "Well, I do have some time coming up, and I think I would like to do an interview and do a documentary on you guys." I didn't know him. His name's Jeremy Norrie. So I said,
and we're so thrilled with the job he did, and
a fantastic job they did.
Yeah.
So, anyways, 2 days before he came over to our house to do the documentary, I had this vivid encounter with him.
The dream.
Dream, where he and I were sitting at our glass table in where we live, and he was saying that two specific things, that he was going to have to go to Arizona very, very soon. He had felt a pull to go to Arizona, and the other thing was that he was having a lot of pain or problems with his left shoulder and his left chest area. So I told this to Leslie. I said, "Okay, when Jeremy shows up, I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to you ask him these two questions, okay?" And sure enough, he was having this pull where he had to go to Arizona.
It was his next project.
It was his very next project, and he had been overdoing it with his push-ups and his exercises, and he was kind of blew out his left side. And, he kind of looked at me saying, thinking, well, maybe these people are for real.
How did he know that?
But this is like I say, this happened at least 4 times I can recall in my life where I've had precog.
So that's what they want. They want psychic Caucasians with green eyes and Rh negatives. So that's who they're after as far as the genetic line.
I'm A positive, but
yes, but in general, I mean,
right.
and we think Old Gligley, we think they apply a handler to each family that they want to track, and we think Old Gligley just happens to be the family's handler, so to speak, and they both protect and prey upon the family. And as we started doing our research into the UFO phenomenon, the theory at the time was that these beings are coming here. The Greys are from the Pleiades, and the Nordics are from over there, and the little Greys over there, and the reptiloids from over here, and the insectoids over there. All these different star systems they're supposed to be coming from.
Right.
But we could not make that theory fit our data. It just wouldn't fit again and again. For one thing, they're seen 10,000 times a year, reported 10,000 times per year, every year, going back many years.
That means more like 100,000, really.
Right, because we think reporting is only about 10%. So that means they're actually being seen 100,000 times a year. So they can't really be coming here from distances unless it's just so easy, unless they open up their garage door and fly into our universe just like that easy.
And what would their motivation be too? It's like, what would their motivation be for
to breed with us,
for exsanguinating cows and other domestic animals, and impregnating women, and over thousands of years. It's just like they are here. I mean, it's and they can breed with us. That means that they're not from Arcturus. They're not from the Pleiades, And what is their motivation? But back to your question, how it has affected me, I think that it kind of pushed me into the idea of becoming an acupuncturist. Also, it pushed me into the idea of going into the military. I think it influenced my life as far as this interaction.
I think that and Tai Chi is why Stephen
I didn't
go crazy and kill the family. Yeah, exactly. Where poor Philip didn't have those resources to pull from.
Yeah, he didn't.
Now there is possibly a reason why, and I don't know how much research or out there you go with your research, but there is talks of like hybrids.
Yes.
Where, like you mentioned, Pleiades or Arcturus, Sirian, where
we don't
they could be here, and that's why they're visiting. They're visiting family and going that route. But
we do not see evidence of that. That just does not make sense.
Yeah, what we've finally determined with our data and our research was that these are actually the Nordics, especially the Nordics, look exactly like Scandinavian humans. They're indistinguishable from Scandinavian humans. And the whole Admiral Byrd stories about him flying under the ice sheet and meeting with these men that were living under the ice sheet.
The Ariani, the race of the Ariani.
And what the thing they said to Byrd was that we normally have nothing to do with you surface people, but and your barbaric wars. They think of us as barbarians. But we have to intervene now because you've learned to crack the atom. And this is a power you shouldn't be playing with. You don't have the ability to control it. So that's, we would just take it all in like, oh, that's a nice story. But sure enough, that's World War II is when they started following our military everywhere we go. Right. The Foo Fighters and all our nuclear bases and our nuclear facilities and our nuclear research centers have all had UFOs dogging them, like constantly watching them.
Yeah, the British, the Chinese, the Russians, they all report this, of course, the United States. And we've done over 2,000 nuclear detonations worldwide since 1945. So,
and the women that are reporting being impregnated are frequently, they're just having sex to get pregnant. So if you're having sex with us and making babies with us, you are us, right? You can't be anything but us, you know?
Otherwise, you'd be making a mule.
And so we started looking into that as the possibility, is that they're really a breakaway civilization of humans. And once we did that, everything started to stick into place with all our data. That's why they're taking mainly Caucasians. They happen to be a branch of the Caucasian race. So they have all kinds of uses for Caucasian DNA, right? In fact, we think that they may be living underground, and we think they're in underground cities and bases. Living underground so long, they may have become non-viable and need regular infusions of DNA from surface dwellers.
And surface animals, too.
And so they're looking for a genetic line of people that as close as possible match their own, perhaps, right? And so there was that lined up, and then the cattle mutilations, when they went underground, we think they took the animals of man with them, and they may also be becoming non-viable. And that's why they're maybe doing all these cattle mutilations. It's not just cattle, it's horses and sheep and goats, but 95% is the animals of man that they're doing this bizarre butchering.
Yeah, you always have to watch what they do, not what they say.
Yeah.
Their actions speak much louder than words. So that's, from the standpoint of, some people saying they're light beings and all that kind of stuff, and coming from, from Piscean for the tall whites, and then the Nordics over here, and all this type of stuff. I think it's so much from our standpoint. Okay,
we don't think it's right.
We think that it is a lot of disinformation because it doesn't meet up with what we have seen, and especially when we found out about the Younger Dryas comet and the Ucella Horizon and the nanodiamonds, and also the genetic bottleneck that happened 12,850 years ago.
That's when we tried to attribute.
It all lines up with.
We tried to figure out, okay, well, if they are a breakaway branch of humanity, why did they go underground? And we have all these stories in history of these people went underground, these people went underground. And we also have a lot of data from abductees that say sometimes the Greys and the Nordics are working together on the same ships. And the tall Greys and the reptiloids are working together on this ship. And the insectoids and the Nordics are working together. So they're not separate races on separate spaceships. They're frequently working in league with one another.
And they're bipedal too, upright walking bipedal, every one of them.
Every single one is a fully upright walking bipedal hominid. And we are the only upright walking race on this planet. Our closest relative is the chimp, and they're obviously still, they can make shift to walk a little bit, but it's not their natural gait. And when they are frightened, they run away on all fours and take to the trees.
And then Bigfoot, of course.
And but so the only upright walkers on this planet are us, the aliens, and Bigfoot. And we think
bears occasionally.
Yeah, well, again, though, it's not a natural gait for them.
Right.
They can sort of make shift to do it, especially if they're trained and, in circuses and stuff like that. But really, when they're frightened, they run away on all fours. They're not fully upright walking.
Yeah, when we get frightened, we don't go down on all fours
and run. Yeah,
No, we run.
Yeah.
We run upright.
that would just slow us down, I think. So we think that. So why did they go underground? And I kind of brought something to the relationship this way, because I minored in ancient art history in college, and one of the things I studied was the flood, the Great Flood. There was a man in 1800s called Fraser, Scottish anthropologist, who wrote a book. I can't remember the title exactly now, but he had tracked down 500 separate cultures worldwide that had a flood myth in their most ancient lore. And that number has actually increased. More have been found. There's almost 1,200 separate cultures with a flood myth, 1,200 different Noah stories out there, pointing to a worldwide shared event, that we all experience together. And then I started looking at the possibility that the Great Flood really did happen. And I was looking at the extinction level event of 13,000 years ago as possible time period for it. At the same time, 13,000 years ago, we lost the Clovis people of North America, the woolly mammoth, the mastodon, the dire wolf, the saber-toothed cat,
Camel.
the American horse and camel, and a bunch of other animals, the stilt bear.
We're pretty much wiped out.
Almost either wiped out completely or decimated. Their numbers decimated so badly that they soon after died out entirely. And for a long time, people were looking for the cause of it. And they discovered 4 decades ago, they discovered nanodiamonds in high concentration in the soil levels of 13,000 years ago. And nanodiamonds only form in celestial impacts of some kind. A meteor or comet or whatever brings dust with it as it enters our atmosphere. And this dust superheats and turns into these little tiny round microdiamonds called nanodiamonds. And there was a high concentration of them in North America at the 13,000 year mark. So that was the smoking gun. We knew we had a celestial impact of some kind. We just had to find the crater. And then they found a crater in 2016 under the glacier of northern Greenland called the Hiawatha Glacier. And it's the Hiawatha Asteroid Impact Crater. And we thought, this is it. We even wrote it into the book. But since then, that crater's been dated to 48 million years ago. And instead, the Younger Dryas comet that struck in Lake Superior area has been dated to the correct date, 12,850 years ago. So that's our murder weapon. We thought it was Hiawatha, but it's really this one.
It was 62 miles across or 100 kilometers. So what I like to say is that it was still Colonel Mustard with a knife, but it was Colonel Mustard with a knife in the dining room instead of in the kitchen. So it was, and also to a comet basically it's a giant dirty snowball with rocks that's hurtling at 40,000 miles an hour that will break apart and will send cinders and fire.
Cause the air bursts and causes fires and stuff.
So that's why we had at least 10 different countries at the same time on 4 different continents that were basically all the forests were on fire at the exact same time.
And the layers of 13,000-year-old soil, one of them is this 2-inch layer of charcoal. And that was like, why do we have a charcoal layer over that many countries and that many continents? And now we know why, because the comet would cause these air bursts and catch all the forests on fire.
Right.
But then it struck the ice sheet. And we had been, 13,000 years ago, we had been on the way out of an ice age. And this comet impact turned it right around and plunged us right back into the ice age again for another 1,100 years. And so we figured that it would still cause the same thing, the great worldwide flood, tsunamis, 1,000-foot tall tsunamis going all around the world.
Cataclysm.
An almost extinction level event for humanity. But there is a genetic bottleneck. Geneticists, we're trying to figure out why we are not as diverse as we should be, the human race. And it turns out that we, at some point, we're reduced to a population of about 10,000 individuals.
It looks like about that
time frame.
So,
and then everybody on the planet has regenerated from those 10,000 people. And that's why we're not very genetically diverse, as we should be.
And one thing I find interesting is it pops in my head every once in a while, and by no means a theologian. I grew up metaphysical, not in dogma. So for me to mention the Bible, there's, like I haven't fully read the book, but something, draws me to a certain point. And when you were mentioning the ETs looking human, and I can't help but thinking the Bible starts out as saying man was created in God's image.
Yes.
So therefore, we would look like them. And it always confuses me when people go, well, I have no concept of what God looks like. I'm like, you look in a
Look in the
mirror, don't you? It's
It's
like it
funny.
tells you what he looks like or she looks like, and
Mhm.
It's funny that you say that because I was also brought up a religious myself too. I wasn't brought up metaphysical, but necessarily, but I knew about the family spirit guy. But when my parents came over here from England, they had some bad interactions with a certain church I won't go into which faith it was, but they brought me up saying, you know what, Stephen, it doesn't matter, it doesn't, what matters is what you do and how you treat people on a daily basis, not just going to church and then just getting your sins absolved on a Sunday or something like that.
exactly.
So
Right. And
so
then, there's the book of Enoch. He talks about the watchers coming to earth, and people talk about them as like angels coming down to earth, 200 of them, according to Enoch. And these watchers started taking wives from humanity and having kids with them. So once again, we're talking about they're us. So what we think happened is, like the Deep Impact movie, where President Morgan Freeman sees they see an asteroid that's going to kill us all coming, right? And plan A is to send astronauts into space to blow it up, hero astronauts, right? Hollywood heroes.
Yeah.
But plan B was to sink these deep underground
Ark.
bunkers or arcs, they called them, to house 50,000 of our brightest and best people,
Yeah.
and make sure our technology and our knowledge and our culture went with them. And we think that's exactly what happened. Somebody on the planet 13,000 years ago, we attribute them to have more technology than people
give 'em credit
currently
for.
give credit for. Somebody had advanced enough astronomy on the planet to figure out this thing was going to hit. Almost all the flood myths start the same way, where they're warned in advance. So they saw it coming. They warned everybody in advance. You better build an ark. You'd better get underground, or you better go to high ground. And almost all the flood myths end the same way too, where and then mankind after the flood, we're shoved back into the Stone Age,
Hunter gatherers.
back into hunter gatherers. Uh, there's 1,000 years of drastic climate upheavals after, making it impossible to grow crops. They would have had to go literally back to hunter gatherer Stone Age people to survive. And so they didn't, but the ones that went underground, they didn't lose their technology. And that's why they're 13,000 years at least ahead of us with their knowledge and technology.
And then it ends up too, like many of them end the same way, like a god or a set of gods,
or a representative of God.
came to the surface, like the Viracochas or the
Kukulkan.
and basically said, okay, now I'm going to give you back civilization and animal husbandry and mathematics and language. And basically, that was the time they called the time when the gods walked amongst
man. But we think it was just them. We don't call them ETs again. We call them intraterrestrials instead of extraterrestrials. We call them
our cousins
because they're
intraterrestrials.
Yeah.
I wonder if how culturally we have, like, say, you could almost argue all the indigenous tribes are similar, but they splintered off into separate groups and therefore became plains or became fishermen or crop, growers, depending on the area they migrated to. I wonder if, because our ages seem to be one day we're this, next day we're that, according to science. The only way to do that, I think, would be is the inner earth peak culture, maybe there was like 5 or 100 of them that were like, hey, these people are suffering up there. We're going to
Yes.
do something to help them.
Right. We
And
think they
inner earth
took
is
pity
like,
on us,
you
at
can't
some
come
point.
back. Yeah. They're like, you can't come back if you leave. And they're like, well, we're going to go anyway. And so
Yeah.
there's where our leaps occurred. Is I
Yes.
think
Right.
somebody came to help.
We think so too.
We think that there's definitely been some direction that has been, and some help. Okay.
Yeah.
And it only just makes sense. You just got to look at what has happened, what has occurred.
And they set themselves up as gods, maybe just for the sake of just making it easier, because everybody would
Simplicity,
do what
yeah.
they're told, right? But they set themselves up in pantheons of 12. So we think family groups came back to the surface. For instance, in Egypt, Osiris and his family group, and
In Babylonia,
and Zeus, and the ancient Greeks have their pantheon of 12, and the Romans had their pantheon of 12, and the
Babylonians and Hittites,
and the Indus people and the Canaanites, always pantheons of 12, setting themselves up as gods. But they're, especially even like the in the Indian, I mean the Americas, the Viracocha in them, he looked Caucasian. He had a beard. He was white. He had a beard, and
red beard.
essentially a Caucasian man that came to them. And so when the conquistadors showed up, they think, oh, it's our gods. They look just like our gods, and
they're
unfortunately,
they're wearing suits of metal, and they're tall white guys, with red beards, a lot of them. So that's why they basically said our gods have come back.
But isn't that great?
Why did they think that? Because that was in their lore.
I'd almost question though if they set themselves up as the gods, or if, let's be honest, we have a habit of somebody shows up that has a lot more technology and say can heal without using drugs.
Yeah.
We're like, you're a god.
You're God. Yeah, maybe it was us.
Yep.
It's true.
Yep.
But they flew in. There's a story of one of them flying in. I think it's Kukulkan. Flies in on a platform that lands. And if you're going to make that kind of an entrance to a primitive people, you're trying to set yourself up as a god, as far as I'm concerned, right?
Yeah, I mean, look at Ezekiel's chariot and all those messages or mentions of, gods flying through the sky. We assume, oh, they're flying on with the horse that's flying and a cart somehow managing to stay afloat, and it's like, no, it's probably is a UFO, but if you've never seen a flying disc or a flying cigar or a flying anything, you're gonna sit there and go, well, I gotta write something because they were flying across. What do we have that I could relate to? And the word chariot shows up, or
fire chariot. So I think they were using rocketry back then.
In fact, the Chinese Emperor Huangdi, he came to China on a fiery dragon. Fiery dragon.
And some of the other prophets
taught him acupuncture, as a matter of fact, too.
And so we think so the flood myths do end that way. It was like mankind is almost wiped out. We're descending into barbarism and cannibalism, and we think they realize that they might need us still, and possibly for their own self-protection, they decided to help us out and give us a hand up. And we think that during this time, they were using their advanced building capabilities to build some of the impossible structures that are around the world. Like Sacsayhuaman is a good example. They keep attributing, mainstream archaeology keeps doing this. They attribute these megalithic structures to a people that absolutely cannot have done it, cannot have built it.
Bronze and copper.
If they did, it would not be in the time frame that they said it took. Like the pyramid took 100 years, say, according to book to do it. And they're like, well, they had so many slaves. I'm like, I don't care if you have 10 million slaves. They're not
Yeah.
moving tons of rock,
Where's
you
the
know,
tailings?
in
Yeah.
Where's the
seconds.
tailings pile? Where's
And
all
the
the tailings pile from
and the
that to start with?
tools, the Great Pyramid is lined. The main chamber, the big chamber, is lined with rose granite from 600 miles upstream up the Nile. And they were only copper tool users. They weren't even bronze tool users. And I assure you, you can take a copper tool and whack it on this granite all day, and you're just going to wreck the tool. It won't even
Yeah.
make a dent in it.
And you gotta then get down to like what was the motivation
Yeah,
for them to do
why?
it? Why?
Why
Yeah.
use colossal blocks when you can make little blocks? A lot of them.
They weren't.
Well, and
We all know
there's
that.
also the fact that we have always been told the pyramid is four-sided with the bottom. Now they said they found, because they looked at it a little more closely, at a specific time, the sun reveals the pyramids are actually eight-sided
Yeah, they do
with the
have a
bottom.
slight indent on the
Yeah.
faces that makes them like triangles instead of like one big triangle. They're two smaller triangles. It's quite true.
Yes.
And so, yeah, there's no way somebody. It's like I was discussing with another guest on another show, like the Nazca lines.
Yeah.
You can't tell me somebody was on the ground walking around making these lines and going, okay, spider's done, good to go.
Yeah.
What's next? Oh, we're doing the monkey next. It's like they had no idea what they were doing on the ground. You could only see it from the sky. And I don't think there's someone
Yeah.
hovering above going, okay, you now got to take 2 steps to the left and, start your indent there.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. No, you ruined
a
it.
little to the left.
Yeah.
And Sacsayhuaman is one of the more impossible structures I found. It's these huge walls are in this weird zigzag, and they don't even go all the way around the facility, so they're really not protective walls.
It's like a sluicing
They look like sluicing stations, like maybe they were running water through them to separate out gold or something like that. But also these rocks that make up the walls of Sacsayhuaman, the biggest ones are 200 tons, and they're andesite. Andesite is a 7 on the Mohs scale, which is the hardest. Granite is the same. So granite's like between 6 and 7, so it's the hardest of the types of granite.
And they're beveled.
And they're bronze tool users, and the same thing applies. They could whack it all day with their bronze tools and make no dent in it at all.
Yeah, we know a couple of people that have been there, so you wouldn't believe what it is when you get there.
They're 25 feet tall,
the
awesome. Walls.
It's like unbelievable.
And like a half a mile long, and 3 tiers, 3 layers of them. And
above Cusco. It's
yeah. And it's like at 12,000 and change foot elevation. So first of all, human builders could barely breathe at that altitude. And they say, oh, they can roll them on trees. What trees? There's no trees there.
At 12,000 foot.
And they're all the softwoods in the jungles of Bolivia, right? They're not the hardwoods you would need to roll any stone.
It's ridiculous,
it just keeps getting stupider and stupider.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
There was an experiment done on a TV show where they tried to build like one piece of Stonehenge using, like they were saying, you roll it on the wood to get it to the spot.
Over these mountains,
And he's rolling it, and they get it to the spot, and then he's like uses pulleys and hinges that would be designed the way they would in their time. And in one day, they got one block in place. And it's like, yeah, this isn't. And he was like, this could be how they did it, but it doesn't match the time frame, so something else had to have been going on.
Also, those blocks, the big stones of Stonehenge, come from Wales, and the terrain between the two locations is mountainous. So not only you'd have to haul it all that distance, you'd have to haul it up and over these mountains too.
I actually have a theory about that, because like the Nile River was up against the Great Sphinx, which is at the foot of the pyramids, which there's
Yes.
9 of. I was surprised to learn that when I was in Egypt. They only talk about the 3.
The big 3, yeah. The pyramids all over the place, really.
I was like, well, if the water came up to here, they could theoretically, they had them on ships. They knew how to carry the big rocks on ships. So theoretically, they could save some time there. And I was thinking with England, like Glastonbury is up on a hill, and they say a lot of times it floods around the hill. So if you look at if the ground was to where it was, saturated with water, they might have been able to use boats to bring the rocks in closer. But at the same time, though, there's no way to predict the weather. So either they could manipulate the weather to bring the stones, or again, somebody with knowledge they didn't have was saying, okay, if you want to do this faster, you got to
like
do
Nan
it.
Madal.
Yeah, and it's like I was going to say, like you're right there. Like for instance, let's say the ground was flooded and it was marshy and boggy, whatever. Now people
They
are
would just
more
think,
worried.
yeah.
They're more worried about feeding their families at the time than building a freaking Stonehenge. So it just doesn't make any common sense.
And like Nan Madal, that weird one out in the Pacific Ocean. First of all, it goes way deep. So it built at a time when ocean levels were a lot lower. So in our opinion, it has to be built much older than they're attributing it to.
Right.
And they say that the quarry for digging the blocks out is on the opposite end of the island. And they tried to take one of the smallest of the blocks and put it on a raft and kind of float it around the island on the other side. They'd end up tilting and dropping into the water. It was impossible. With our technology, we couldn't do it.
Yeah, in their lore, they talk about literally almost like a giant helicopter that looked like a like a dragon, whatever would come over and carry the blocks, the basalt blocks, and put them in place. It was something that was technological, but it was called like a giant dragon or something like that.
And Sacsayhuaman means the place of the falcon. And they have a story about a giant falcon that would spit fire out of its mouth, and that's the people of the area. That's their ancient myth about how it was built.
Yeah, how they
this
melted
giant
the
falcon would just put the blocks in place, levitate them into place,
and
then fuse them into place with its breath.
Sounds more like a thunderbird.
It sounds like fire again.
Misidentified technology.
Yeah.
And it also, I don't know if you guys have ever seen Ancient Aliens.
Yeah, many times.
Rarely quote this show, but there is one spot they go to a lot that always amazes me, and I believe it's pronounced
Pumapunku.
Yes, where you had the H blocks that are perfect. And they're like, we can't even slide a piece of paper in here.
Yep. Yeah.
And those are 144 tons sandstone blocks.
Some of them are, yes, exactly.
And they also have really intricate carved andesite there as well.
And the places where they had the 90-degree turn in the rock, it's not, two rocks put together. It is one piece.
Yes. Yes, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's
and
amazing.
The triple bevel cuts, they have these. It would take diamond cutters, to be able to do it nowadays. And, we can't actually recreate these megalithic structures now, not without leaving crane marks on them. And none of these stones have crane marks. Yeah. And as big as these are, the ones we've been talking about are the trilithon stones in the Baalbek Foundation. They're the biggest man-made stones to ever have been placed anywhere. They're
880 tons.
880 tons
a piece.
That's 1.4 million pounds or something like that. It's like, and not only are they ridiculous huge, and the three of them together, and you can't get a credit card in between them. They're so well fit together. They're up high on a mountain. And on top of that mountain is a 20-foot platform of other megalithic rocks, not as big, but big. And these stones rest on top of those. So not only do you have to drag these things up a mountain, you have to then lift them up onto a 20-foot high platform and fit them together so tight that you can't put a credit card in between them.
Yeah.
It simply cannot have been.
It must have been very easy.
It wasn't the Romans, I'll tell you that.
For whoever was doing it, it had to have been something that wasn't that hard.
Yeah, and that's why they would choose gigantic stones, because it's easy and they can do it.
They last forever, pretty much.
So I actually have a question for you, Leslie, because you mentioned being the ancient art
history. Yeah,
study.
I studied that. Yeah.
What was your thoughts when you were looking at like the Renaissance, Dark Age paintings, and there's like a black disc that's shining light down and something, and everyone's like, "Oh, look at this and look at this," and nobody wants to acknowledge.
Looks like a UFO to me.
Yeah.
Especially there's one called the Annunciation of Mary, when Gabriel tells her she's going to be bear the Savior. And up in the sky, sure enough, there's a definite UFO. It looks like a flying saucer with lights underneath of it, and it's shining a light down on her, like it's got a light beam, And there's all kinds of stuff in our ancient art that is right in line with our theories about it. There's a woodcut from the 1600s that shows the sheep mutilation phenomenon, and another one from that era that shows crop circles.
Yeah, that's
so this stuff's been going on for a long time.
Yeah, that's from Bramley's work, The Gods of Eden, that I read back in like '93. Good book.
And the battle over Nuremberg is it's a woodcut from the 1500s that shows a space battle up in the sky.
Yeah, the Hindus talk about it too. They talk about their, Brahma and whatnot having battles.
And the what's the Hindu text again called?
It's called the Ramayana, or
that's it, the Ramayana. They talk about battles between gods and using nuclear weapons. And then there is a town in the Indus Valley in India that it's called
Mohenjo-daro.
Mohenjo-daro, thank you. And it actually looks like it was a nuclear weapon was used upon the town. The people everything in the town is radioactive, and the stones are fused together and made like glass. Like the high heat of a weapon.
It's called vitrification.
Yeah, and even the skeletons and stuff show high radiation content. It looks like at some point, nuclear weapons were being used on this planet, and we can only assume that our cousins maybe were fighting each other at one point or another.
Mm-hmm. That's why we're made in their image,
Yeah, and I feel like there's. As you mentioned, a lot of texts that have like the flood. There is stories that I've come across that's not as prolific and not as well talked about, but are there if you know how to look. And they call it the War in Heaven, or the War of Heaven. And I'm wondering, your thoughts of, what that is in your guys' opinion with what research you've done.
Enki and Enlil.
Sorry?
Enki and Enlil.
Oh, yeah. Well, the ancients, we've been talking mostly about 13,000 years ago, right? But that's the first half of our book. The second half of our book is looking at Sitchin's evidence and the ancient Sumerian tablets and what they have to say. And the ancient Sumerian tablets, some people think Sitchin was a terrible translator, but he's not the only source for the translations. And we think it's more like professional jealousy, because
it was snobbery. There was
because he doesn't have a PhD, right? He didn't have a PhD.
Paleontologists that basically said, "Oh, you didn't go through all the proper channels, so therefore."
And he gave them a lot of grief because he was trying to get them to do a DNA test on Queen Parabi. Queen Parabi is a first dynasty queen of ancient Sumeria that has a very bizarre shaped head. And Sitchin believed that she's part God, like part Anunnaki.
Yeah,
And
hybrid.
these, if you go back 300,000 years ago, Sitchin thought that the Anunnaki were aliens that came here that uplifted mankind from Homo erectus into Homo sapien. And again, I would think, well, that's a nice little story, a nice little myth, right? But it turns out that our human genome is showing signs of editing, like CRISPR type of editing that we can do now. But that would have had to have been taken place a long time ago. And sure enough, it's in the speech centers of the brain.
The neocortex near the Broca's brain. Actually, Jason Martell is really big on this. He's like one of the ancient alien guys. I met him and he did a whole seminar on where it looks like there is literally a cut and paste job done on the neocortex of
Like
the
maybe
area.
we were really uplifted,
Yeah,
from
so
being, because
around about 300,000 years ago.
and then there is like this weird gap there, the missing link kind of thing, right? There's actually two good-sized missing links in the slow evolution of man between Australopithecus and Homo habilis. That's a huge link missing because Homo habilis has like a foot like a human, but Australopithecus had a foot like an ape. Like the big toe was still more like a thumb. And so there's a huge gap there. But later there's another one, Homo
Homo
erectus to Homo sapien. This change from one to the other happened very quickly. Evolutionary time
Right.
periods. And it's an enormous jump, not just in our speech centers, but also in our reasoning and thinking capabilities. Homo erectus was still really kind of an animal. It still drink water, like scoop it up with a hand, right? Whereas Homo sapien, we make cups and chairs and houses to sit in, and also the what is when you can abstract thinking. That's it. Abstract thinking, where you look at a picture of an apple and you see it as an apple. Whereas animals can't do that. They can't look at a flat picture of something and reason it out that this is supposed to be an apple, whatever. And so we think
Right.
that we think they may actually have uplifted us. In that case, if it's true, and the Anunnaki really were aliens that came here and uplifted us, they used their own DNA to do it. So that means all of us, all of Homo sapiens sapien, are part alien.
Right.
That'll blow your mind.
I tend to agree with that, and that's where I feel like, in my theory, is we're all hybrids. That's why we get visited. Is some of us are more attuned and adapted to both sides, so to speak, where others are, you know what, I'm human, I was born here, that's all there is, and that's fine, that's their choice. I feel like we all have, and it's up to us to decide, okay, am I going to embrace and see what comes of being this hybrid and what this other source in me can bring, or not. And so those of us who are like, I felt like tapped, or maybe had family history of going, into the paranormal side, as some people like to call it, or the abnormal aside from normal, meaning like could do premonitions, could do healing without using herbs. All these gifts, I feel like those lines and those people tapped into their hybrid side. And more are doing it. So I think more and more races are sitting there saying, oh, wait, there's an evolution coming, an ascension coming. Let's go help, instead of sitting back and waiting. Now is the time to start to show up and say, hey, we're here, we're going to help. And that's why I feel like some experiences are good and, have, and when I say good, meaning like, you get to go on a ship, you get to talk, come back, a nice visitation.
And only a little anal probe, not a big one.
Yeah, right.
Just a little scoop off the arm,
Yeah,
nothing
no biggie.
big.
Just a
But,
little sample, and we'll put you back.
As an example, my Tai Chi teacher, Robert Davis, who studied with Marshall Ho, who was a student of Chen Manching. So anyway, when I was 18, I'd been studying for almost about a year and a half with him in a class, and a family, the St. Maries, they decided to stop studying, and he was kind of ticked off. He was a heavy set guy, about 5'10", big Buddha belly, okay? And he was studying to be a chiropractor. And he was annoyed that they had just like quit the class, right? So anyways, he was demonstrating what's called brush, knee, and push, right? And he had me in front of him, and I was like a good 4 to 6 feet away from him. And I was just standing there. He was just demonstrating this thing, and he hit me from 4 to 6 feet away with his chi, knocked me over. Okay.
Yeah, it's real.
I had a lot of chi at that point in my life too. I was 18, right? So I had this chi field, right? It's like you can feel it,
Yeah.
especially when you're young. And so he hit my chi field and just knocked me right over. And I wasn't expecting it. Okay. So I know these things about chi and tai chi.
Yeah.
They were real. Okay.
But one of the things I found hysterical when I was doing this research, in Darwin came out with his theory about evolution. And at the time, the church rose up in fury and said, no, God created us in his image. We're not, we didn't come from monkeys, right? And so the church and Darwin and the science community and the church community, they were at odds and fighting each other tooth and nail during this time period. But if the Anunnaki really did uplift us, both are right. We slowly evolved into Homo erectus, and then the gods came in and finished making man. So creating the man, right. the race. So both theories are right, in which case they were fighting over nothing, right?
Yeah, literally, almost.
Yeah, and I have to say, I love how the universe works, because when we started, I was like, wow, we covered a lot and only 20 minutes went by. How are we going to fill the rest of this time? And then I would start to look again, and it's like, oh, we're at an hour mark, and we're already at an hour and a half mark.
Yeah, that's about how long it takes us to relate our theories, we found. It's
about an hour and a half, about right.
Yeah, just about.
So
our experiences together,
I'm going to take this opportunity and ask you to share with everyone, where can they find you and your books?
Oh, yes, thank you. Our shameless promotion moment is the book is called Who They Are and What They're Up To by Leslie and Stephen Shaw. And the documentary that we made recently that we just love, I highly recommend it. It's called Who They Are. And it's on YouTube, but you can search either way. Who are they or who they are? Like both of them, it comes up right away if you search that.
Yeah, we have 382,000
views now. Yeah, and it only came out on October 4th, so we were thrilled with the response. And then we are starting our new show. We're wearing our uniform T-shirts. We're going to start our new show.
About a week.
And you've. For your audience, Michael's graciously going to be a guest with us.
Yes.
And it's called Abductions 101, UFOs and the Paranormal Connection. Because we find a great deal of the paranormal fits into our theories.
Yeah.
Because, we think they use genetic modification whenever they feel like it. So we think they created the reptiloids and the insectoids, but it's really the Nordics in charge. The Nordics are the ones who met with Byrd and Eisenhower.
Yeah.
And so these cryptids that everyone's seeing, Dogman and Mothman, we think they're just them messing with genetic modifications for their purposes.
Tinker toys for them, We're just like,
I have some stuff on the cryptids that I think will surprise you guys for next week.
Oh, I can't wait. Thank you.
You got it.
Oh, and we also are on Instagram. And if people out there, you want to communicate with us or you want to share a story with us, we'd be thrilled to hear it. And we're on Facebook and Instagram at the same handle, and that's leslie.shaw.author. And it's the Leslie spelling of Leslie. And we have a website called whotheyarebbook.com.
No, wait. Can you say that again? I'm trying to type it in.
Oh, sure. Leslie.shaw.author.
And you spelled Leslie?
Leslie.
Okay.
And then whotheyarebbook.com, we have excerpts and some blogs and links to all of the podcasts that we do.
We've got some of my music on the Facebook handle too. Right?
Yeah, Stephen's, we did some very nice recordings of some of his original music and some of the stuff that's in the public domain because it's old enough.
And I will say all the links that they have provided that they sent to me are in the description, so you should have no problem finding them and reaching out to them. So the ones I wasn't sure about, I just posted on the bottom of the screen for those to pause and write down. So
and thank you so much for having us.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I'm so excited that you guys were on and we had such fun, and I cannot wait till next week, Friday.
By the way, we'll let you talk then.
I really like your opening music and your graphics.
Yeah, that was cool.
They're really striking.
Well, thank you. Short little tidbit about that is my cousin does that, and he does ads for his mom and other things, and so he I have to give him full credit to that. I just give him ideas, and then he, like, I'll say I want to do these topics, and then he comes back and says, here's what I have, and I'm like, wow, and you're not even in this field.
Fair enough.
You nailed it.
Yeah,
good job.
Tell him for us that we were impressed.
Yep.
I will. He enjoys hearing that, and I told him season 3 is coming, and he goes, your intro and outro are getting such positive, don't change it. I'm like, okay, we're not changing it.
There you go. Go ahead and keep it. Yeah. And thanks everyone at home for listening. We appreciate it.
Yes, we do.
Yes. And so with that, I'm going to ask, between the two of you, what is a golden nugget from your life's experiences, can be on through any topic, you'd like to leave the audience with?
Golden nugget, as far as my experience, is that a lot of the old teachings are true. Like, for instance, the Zen talking about the one pure thought, being able to grasp the universe. It is true. And, obviously, there's also that old saying, too, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. I have found that to be true in my life. Look for your mentors, okay?
And I'd like to say that one thing I like about our theories is that it doesn't require any theoretical physics to be true. Because they're not coming here from distant star systems, you don't have to have faster than light travel or wormholes. And because they're just here, we don't need time travel or interdimensional travel. We know they open portals and step through them because that's how Stephen's light, a door kind of opened and flooded the room with blue light, and he stepped into this portal, and that maybe that is interdimensional travel, but it's not required for our theories to work, and so I think that makes them all the more plausible.
Yeah, watch out for false prophets too.
Yeah, very well said. And normally I like to tie it in, but you guys said that so well, I don't even think I need to try and tie it in. So I am just going to say good night, good day, good afternoon, wherever you are. And if you're asleep, please wake up and watch this episode. I think you're going to truly enjoy it. And I had a lot of fun. And hopefully we can get you both back on for another episode.
We'd love to.
Nanu.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you. And I love the Mork and Mindy reference. I I was picking that up.
Shawspot.
And Star Trek too.
That's right.
Yep.
Live long and prosper.
Live long and live long and prosper. That's what it
And
is.
peace and prosperity too.
Good night,
All right.
everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.